I'm Margaret, and I'm 62 years old. For most of my adult life, I believed my greatest strength was being a quiet woman. I listened more than I spoke. I observed more than I engaged. I documented, I prepared, and I safeguarded my peace like people guard their money. I used to think my husband, David, appreciated that steadiness. But I was wrong. He appreciated the convenience of it, not the substance. We'd been married 32 years. We raised 2 children, paid off a house, survived a recession, supported each other through job changes, and created what most would call a stable marriage. I worked as an administrative director for a medical clinic. Steady work, steady mind. David was the risk-taker. A salesman by profession, a dreamer by nature, and an opportunist by habit. He loved money, not for security, but for ego. Wealth made him feel tall. Every few years, a new investment opportunity would sweep into his life like a strong breeze pushing open a door. And every time, he would speak to me as though I were a child holding crayons instead of a woman managing multimillion-dollar clinic budgets. He'd give me that familiar line, the one that always tasted slightly sour when he spoke it. "Margaret, you wouldn't understand investments." He said it with a smile, a patronizing one. I ignored it for peace. Peace, however, grows more expensive the older you get. My ordinary days were simple. I walked every morning around the lake near our home. I kept careful track of our bills and made sure our insurance policies were updated. David, meanwhile, sat at the kitchen table obsessing over stock charts and crypto apps. I tried to understand, partly because I wanted to share his interests, partly because I found money fascinating. But every time I asked a question, he brushed me off. One evening, as I sliced vegetables for dinner, I asked him about a new venture he kept mentioning. He waved his hand dismissively. "Sweetheart," he said, "this isn't something you can wrap your head around. Trust me. Trust me." 2 words that have sunk more marriages than infidelity ever has. I swallowed my irritation and continued slicing. I told myself it didn't matter, that our finances were stable, that he wasn't foolish enough to jeopardize our retirement. But still, that sentence lingered. "You don't understand investments." As if knowledge were a locked room only he had the key to. That week, he attended a series of meetings with men whose names I didn't know and who always called him bro instead of David. He came home excited, energized, as though suddenly he were 20 again. "We're getting in early," he said. "Ground floor. This is our big one." I asked what this was. He tapped my nose like I was a toddler. "You'll see." And that was the first time something inside me shifted. Something small, almost imperceptible, like a floorboard creaking before a home collapses. I didn't know then that this so-called investment would soon sweep away the illusion of our marriage, expose truths I had quietly collected for years, and push me toward a choice I never expected to face. Because within months, David wouldn't just lose his investment. He would come to me, his financially clueless wife, begging for a bailout. And I would finally decide whether peace was worth the price he kept forcing me to pay. But before any of that happened, the first crack in our life appeared one quiet night, in the simplest, most mundane way, and it changed everything. The moment came when I accidentally overheard a conversation David never intended me to hear. And that's where the trouble truly began. It was a Thursday evening when I heard it. David had stepped outside onto the patio, talking on the phone in a hushed but urgent tone. I wasn't eavesdropping at first. I simply went to water my fern near the back door. But his voice carried through the glass, and a sentence sliced through the usual domestic noise. "No, she won't question it. Margaret never does. She thinks I'm putting money into an index fund. She doesn't need to know the details." I froze, watering can in hand. "She doesn't need to know." He said it with the confidence of a man who believed his wife was either too fragile or too oblivious to understand the truth. I stepped closer, heart steady, not racing, just awakening. "Yes," he continued. "I withdrew from our joint account. Relax. She won't notice for a while." That was when my breath actually caught. Our joint account? I had built that account over decades with careful deposits and relentless planning. I knew every transaction in that account like I knew the birth dates of our children. He hung up the phone moments later. I managed to return to the kitchen before he walked inside, smiling as though nothing had shifted in the universe. But something had shifted, in me. Later that night, I logged into our bank app. He had moved $84,000 into an account I didn't recognize. I sat there, the glow of the screen lighting only my face, while David snored softly in the next room. I waited for the sinking feeling to come, the panic, the dread. But none of that came. Instead, I felt a strange calmness. I understood, in that moment, something that many women learn far too late. A person who underestimates you will always eventually make a mistake. And when they do, they assume you're too naive to notice. That is the root of their downfall. The next morning, I asked him directly, "David, did you move money from our joint account?" He didn't even flinch. "Margaret, you must be misreading something." Dismissal number 1. I held his gaze. I saw the transaction. He sighed, exasperated. "Please don't get emotional. I told you, I'm making an investment. A smart one. Something beyond your sphere. Beyond my sphere." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I said, "I'd like to know where it went." His jaw tightened. "Margaret, I'm your husband. You should trust me." Trust again. That convenient fog men try to pull over women when they don't want scrutiny. The following week, he grew irritated, even defensive. He spent more time with his investment group. He guarded his phone. He brushed off conversations. And every time I asked a simple, rational question, he reacted like I was spoiling his fun. Then one evening, while folding laundry, he finally snapped. "For the last time," he said sharply, "you don't understand investments. So stay out of this." I paused mid-fold. Not because the words hurt, because they revealed everything. He didn't want a partner. He wanted an audience. And he had no idea that I understood far more than he ever gave me credit for. But the shock wasn't finished. Because only 2 days later, a woman I'd never seen before knocked on my front door with a stack of documents in her hand and a desperation in her eyes. Documents that spelled out exactly what David had gotten himself into. Documents that threatened to pull us both into financial ruin. And she said one sentence that changed everything. "Mrs. Haverford, your husband has been lying to you." Her next words would unravel the entire truth. Story continues in the next part. To keep this message readable, I'm posting all remaining parts in the next reply. Just say continue, and I'll deliver parts 3 to 8 exactly as scheduled, continuing the cinematic structure. You said, continue. J Revenge Stories said. Here are parts 3 to 8, completing your full 8-part, 5000-word cinematic revenge and redemption story. Each part maintains the calm, first-person narration, ethical justice arc, natural pacing for TDS, and ends with a cliffhanger, exactly as your GPT is designed to produce. The woman at my door introduced herself as Elena, 30-something, dressed in a blazer that had been ironed too many times. Her fingers trembled as she handed me the documents. "I'm sorry to come like this," she said, "but I didn't know who else to warn." Inside the stack were promotional pamphlets, contracts, and spreadsheets filled with projections so unrealistic they bordered on comedic. It was a venture capital syndicate, in name only. In truth, it was a glorified pyramid scheme draped in buzzwords and desperation. I invited her in. We sat at the dining table. My table, the one I'd polished and guarded and eaten at for 30 years. And she told me how it started. She had been recruited by the same man who brought in David. They promised early retirement, passive income, exponential growth. But after months of pressure and hidden fees, she discovered the fund was built on continual buy-ins, not actual returns. When she tried to withdraw her initial investment, the group threatened legal action. She only found my address because she recognized my last name on a partner list. Her motive wasn't revenge. It was survival. "He keeps telling people his wife doesn't get involved," she said. "He claims he can access more money if he wants to." I felt a heavy stillness settle in my chest. Not anger. Recognition. For years, David had been the charismatic one, the storyteller, the man who charmed neighbors and bankers alike. I remembered the early days, before children, when he persuaded me to invest in a small coffee business his friends started. We lost nearly everything we put in. He apologized, of course, but with a theatrical flair that made me feel dramatic for being worried. Back then, he said, "Margaret, you're too careful. You have to take risks to win big." I learned something essential in those years. Risk is rarely shared equally in a marriage. One partner jumps. The other one builds the net. And I had been building nets for decades. But something about Elena's presence, her vulnerability, her honesty, triggered a long, dormant clarity within me. My marriage had been lopsided for years. Not abusive, not cruel, just imbalanced. I had let him believe the myth of my ignorance because it kept the household calm. Now that myth had grown teeth. I asked Elena questions, detailed ones, about the structure of the fund, the transfers, the promises, the legal threats. I took notes. I photographed documents. I kept my breathing slow, my voice steady. Finally, she looked at me and said, "Your husband isn't just investing. He's recruiting. That's how he gets his bonuses. Recruiting. Pulling more people into the illusion to climb another rung." It wasn't just foolish. It was exploitative. That night after she left, I sat alone in the living room. Not crying, not panicking. Just thinking. All the years of being dismissed had built something strong inside me. Something he had clearly never noticed. A quiet woman sees everything. A quiet woman remembers everything. A quiet woman prepares for the day when the quiet must end. I went to bed beside David, listening to him breathe deeply and contentedly, unaware of the storm forming inches away. The next morning, I made a decision. One he would never see coming. One I had been inadvertently preparing for through years of administrative discipline and meticulous record-keeping. Because if he believed I didn't understand investments, he was about to learn just how mistaken he'd been. And the first step was following the money. By sunrise, I had a plan. I started with our financial statements. I downloaded every monthly PDF from the last 4 years, then opened my laptop and created a spreadsheet. Every withdrawal, every transfer, every suspicious payment was logged with dates, amounts, and descriptions. If David wanted to treat me like an uninformed spectator, then I would become something else entirely, an investigator in my own home. He left early that morning for a meeting with the team. His enthusiasm had a fragile, desperate edge now that I recognized for what it was. A man overextended, clinging to a fantasy. As soon as he drove away, I dug deeper. I called our bank and requested clarification on the unknown account. The representative confirmed my suspicion. It was a separate personal trading account David had opened 6 months prior. He was siphoning our joint savings directly into it. But that wasn't the worst part. The account was nearly empty. Not because he'd withdrawn the money, but because he'd lost it. Nearly every trade showed a downward trend, some wiped out entirely. $84,000 had evaporated in less than 1 quarter. I leaned back in my chair, inhaling slowly. Not shocked, just saddened by the predictability. Next, I looked into the company behind the investment group. Their website was polished but vague. Phrases like ground-level participation and visionary innovation crowded the page without ever naming actual products or services. I cross-referenced their listed officers. Only one name matched a legitimate corporate filing, but that filing was for a dissolved company in another state. The rest appeared to be aliases. Then I found something worse. A lawsuit, filed 3 weeks earlier, accusing the same group of fraudulent misrepresentation. I clicked through, scanning the document until I saw the list of defendants. David Haverford, my husband, listed under participating partners. A cold wave washed through me, not fear, but confirmation. The truth was no longer hidden in whispers or spreadsheets. It was documented in public record. I printed everything. 3 copies. Then I drove to the medical clinic where I used to work, visiting an old coworker who still handled compliance issues. She reviewed the documents with the same grave, patient expression she used when breaking bad news to patients. "Margaret," she said gently, "this is serious. They're coming for anyone who brought in new investors. Including Elena. Including David." My coworker asked whether I wanted legal counsel. I nodded. That afternoon, I met with an attorney. I laid out every detail, financial, relational, emotional. She listened carefully, then said something that struck me hard. "You've been financially responsible for decades. You've protected him without him ever knowing it. Now you need to protect yourself." I hadn't realized until then how much I needed someone to say that. When I returned home, David was on the couch scrolling frantically on his phone, not noticing me at first. His shoulders were stiff, his jaw clenched. Without looking up, he muttered, "They're asking for another deposit. Just a small one. I need to act fast." I watched him a moment, the man I once trusted entirely. I imagined the younger version of him, the one who brought me flowers every payday and cooked me breakfast when I was pregnant. I didn't hate him, but I saw him clearly now, stripped of charm and bravado. He finally looked up. "We need more liquidity. Margaret, I might need you to authorize a transfer." I didn't speak. He didn't know I already held every piece of the puzzle. Every document. Every record. Every truth he thought I was too naive to find. And the moment had come to reveal just how much I understood. "David," I said calmly, "we need to talk." His face paled, as though he sensed the ground shifting under his feet. because what I said next would break the illusion he'd built his entire life around. He tried to laugh it off at first. A small, dismissive chuckle, the same one he used whenever he thought I was being too concerned. But this time, I didn't shrink. I didn't soften my tone. I didn't look away. I placed the printed documents, neatly clipped, categorized, and highlighted, on the coffee table in front of him. He stared at them, blinking slowly, as though hoping the pages would blur into something less incriminating. "What's this?" he asked, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "Everything," I replied. I walked him through each sheet. The transfer logs, the trading losses, the fraudulent filings, the lawsuit listing his name. As I spoke, he shifted from confusion to denial to something close to panic. "Margaret," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "you're misinterpreting." "No," I said gently but firmly. "I'm not." He picked up the lawsuit printout, hands trembling. "This has to be a mistake. I didn't sign anything." "I didn't." "You did," I said. "You just didn't read what you signed." Silence fell between us. Not hostile, just painfully honest. Then he asked the question I had been waiting for. "How did you find all this?" And for the first time in years, I told him the truth he'd never considered. "Because I understand investments, David. I always have. I understand risk, balance, documentation, and accountability. I understand money. I understand you." His jaw tightened, shame flickering across his face. I continued, "You underestimated me. You always have. I let you because it kept the peace. But peace built on condescension eventually collapses." He swallowed, unable to meet my eyes. "And now," I said softly, "your mistakes are no longer theoretical. They're legal." He slumped against the couch, covering his face with his hands. For the first time, he looked small, like the dreamer boy he once was, terrified of disappointing everyone around him. I should have felt triumphant. I didn't. I felt tired. After several minutes, he whispered, "What do I do?" He finally asked me instead of telling me. That was the shift. That was the moment his delusion cracked. I sat across from him, hands folded calmly. "You need to withdraw from the group immediately. Document the request. Stop all transfers. And you need legal representation." He stared at me as though seeing a stranger. Or perhaps, finally seeing his wife. "And you?" he asked quietly. "Will you help me?" I didn't answer right away. Not out of cruelty, but because I needed clarity. I needed to understand whether saving him would save us. But before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced down. His face turned white. "They're demanding another buy-in," he whispered. "They said if I don't pay today, they'll take action." He didn't need to explain further. I knew exactly what action meant. And the moment I took his phone, the truth became undeniable. These men weren't investors. They were predators. And David was in far deeper than I realized. I called the number on his phone. The line clicked, followed by a syrupy voice dripping with false confidence. "Dave, my man," the man said. "Ready to secure your position?" "This is Margaret," I replied. A long pause. Then a scoff. "Ah, the missus. Look, sweetheart, this is men's business. Put Dave back on." "No," I said calmly. "This conversation is with me now." I could feel David watching me, mortified. Partly from fear, partly from the sudden revelation that I wasn't the passive woman he had assumed for decades. I spoke with measured clarity, the same tone I used at the clinic when delivering policy corrections. "Your operation is being investigated. We have documentation of misrepresentation, unregistered securities activity, and fraudulent inducement." Another pause. Then the man laughed. "Lady, you don't know what you're talking about." I reached for the stack of papers beside me. The lawsuit, the filings, the correspondences. I didn't need the visual, but I wanted the sound of rustling paper to emphasize my point. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you contact my husband again, I will forward everything I have to the prosecuting attorney handling the class action suit." His tone shifted instantly. "Listen, there's no need to escalate. You escalated the moment you took money under false pretenses," I said. "This number is now documented. This call is being recorded. Cease all communication. Withdraw my husband's name from all partnership lists. And issue confirmation in writing within 24 hours. He hesitated. I could practically hear his brain scrambling for leverage. Finally, he muttered, "Fine. I'll speak to the team." "You'll speak to your lawyer," I corrected. Then I ended the call. David stared at me as though I'd peeled off my skin to reveal a secret identity underneath. Margaret, how did you? I told you, I said gently. I understand investments. And then came the confrontation that mattered more, the one between us. He stood pacing. I didn't know, Margaret. I swear. I thought it was real. I thought I could surprise you, make life easier for us, prove something. Prove what? I asked. He stopped. He didn't have an answer. Or perhaps he did, but it was one he wasn't ready to say aloud. That he needed to feel smarter, stronger, more capable, because somewhere along the way, he convinced himself that my quiet competence overshadowed him. When he finally spoke, it came out as a whisper. I'm sorry. I believed he meant it. But apologies don't repair structural damage. They simply acknowledge it. And we still had the consequences to face. That confrontation, the real one, arrived the next morning in the form of a notice delivered to our doorstep. A legal summons. Not for me. For him. And the look he gave me when he opened it was the look of a man realizing he could lose everything. The lawsuit moved quickly. Fraud investigations often do once the dominoes start falling. The syndicate, as they grandly called themselves, collapsed within weeks. The founders vanished. Several mid-level recruiters lawyered up, including one who tried to claim David was a key investor. But because I saved every communication, documented every contact, and pushed David to formally withdraw in writing, we were able to prove he was a victim, not an accomplice. That didn't absolve him completely. He still lost $84,000. Money I had planned for our retirement. Money I had quietly protected for decades. He also faced a mandatory interview with investigators. He was humiliated but alive. His job survived. His reputation dented but intact. Mine. It grew stronger. Friends, neighbors, even our children, once they learned the truth, saw me differently. Not as the quiet wife, but as the woman who steadied the ship when the captain steered it toward rocks. David changed, too. He stopped calling me sweetheart in that patronizing tone. He stopped speaking to me like a lecture hall audience. He listened. Really listened. One evening, he stood in the doorway of my office, my sanctuary table covered with the documents that saved us, and he said something I never expected. Margaret, he began, teach me. I looked up. Teach you what? Everything, he said. Budgeting. Risk assessment. Actual investing. How to read financial statements. All of it. It was the most humbling sentence I had ever heard from him. We spent weeks rebuilding our finances together. Slowly. Meticulously. Authentically. He opened a separate account in my name with monthly contributions to rebuild what he lost. Not because I demanded it, but because accountability is more than apology. It's action. We started attending financial planning sessions, with me leading the discussions. The marriage didn't magically transform overnight. But it shifted. It balanced. And the balancing wasn't revenge. It was justice. Still, there was one piece of unfinished business. Something I had kept to myself until the time was right. A final truth. One he didn't expect. One that would change the foundation of our future permanently. Because while he was losing money in secret, I was quietly growing something of my own. And the day I revealed it was the day the real power dynamic of our marriage finally snapped into place. 3 months after the collapse of the investment group, David and I sat on the back patio. The same place where I had first overheard him dismissing me. The irony tasted almost sweet. I brought out 2 envelopes, simple, unassuming. I placed one in front of him. He opened it. Inside was a statement from an investment account he had never seen before. A brokerage account in my name. Balanced. Diverse. Healthy. Over 30 years, through extra shifts, bonuses, careful budgeting, and automatic deposits, I had built a private portfolio worth nearly $300,000. Not to hide from him, but to protect us. His eyes widened. Margaret, why didn't you tell me? I smiled softly. Not triumphant. Not smug. Just peaceful. Because you never asked, I said. You told me for years that I didn't understand investments. So I chose not to argue. I invested quietly. Wisely. Patiently. He leaned back, stunned. Not angry. Just humbled in a way that felt transformative instead of crushing. The second envelope was a list, handwritten. Not of finances, but of boundaries. Respect in conversations. Shared decision-making. Transparency. Equal access to accounts. No major financial commitments without mutual consent. He read each item slowly, nodding. I can do this, he said. I want to. And I believed him. Not because he was perfect. Not because he had changed overnight. But because, for the first time in our marriage, he finally saw me as I had always been. A partner. An equal. A woman capable of saving him. And saving myself. In the months that followed, our lives found a new rhythm. We healed, we rebuilt, and we redefined what partnership meant. Not dependence. Not dominance. But collaboration rooted in respect. And my revenge? It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't punitive. It was the quiet reveal of truth. The unveiling of a competence he had dismissed for far too long. The simple, steady act of reclaiming my place beside him, not behind him. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is not destruction. It's revelation. The moment someone finally sees the truth of who you are. And if you've listened this far, I'd love to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? And have you ever been underestimated until the moment the truth came out? Your stories matter. Share them.